The article I chose to critique is called, quote, An Economist's Perspective on Student Loans in the United States, unquote, by Susan Donarski, a professor at the University of Michigan. Obviously, Donarski wrote this so as to explain what student loans are like economically speaking, because people typically see a large number with a dollar sign in a regular article and they automatically think it's bad. But in fact, through reading this article, I see that it's not really as bad as it seems, considering what I normally read, especially because the government needs to simply form a better policy on the matter to make it much more effective. I very much enjoyed this article. It wasn't incredibly difficult to understand, although it required my undivided attention so as to make sure I picked up all the information. But as with all things, it can be improved. To begin, the introduction to the article is fairly good, but there are two major issues concerning it. First of all, an entire paragraph in the introduction is simply the abstract, copy and pasted into a different part of the paper underneath the heading of introduction. As a reader of this article, this paragraph shows me that in some ways the author can be lazy, making me go into the rest of the article with a pre-existing belief that this article will be sloppy and lazily written. Now, even though that turned out to be untrue, at the time, it was an idea pooling inside my mind. As well as that fairly major issue, she also spoiled her conclusion in the introduction. I was expecting her to slowly build up to her conclusion by means of evidence and analysis, but instead I learned what she believed right off the bat, so every piece of information that she presented to me felt like it was simply proof for one side of the argument, her side of the argument, making this article very one-sided. Later, under the section titled, quote, The Economic Rationale for Government Loans to Students, unquote, a fair amount of the information is absolutely pointless. Donarski devotes multiple paragraphs and nearly a full page to describing student loans in South Africa and Chile. Upon first reading this section, I believed she would somehow connect to the United States, but the only connection she made here was that their system is different from ours. Never did Donarski say that theirs was better in any way, or that ours was flawed in some way, just that they did it differently. This page is completely pointless to the rest of the article because it adds nothing to it, because the article is solely about the United States, just like the title states. So when no connection is made, it makes it an unnecessary bit of writing. Many times throughout the article, she mentions how at the time, quote, 40 million people in the United States hold student debt totaling $1 trillion, unquote. I bring up this repetition because she constantly underemphasizes it. For 40 million 22-year-olds, roughly having to pay a couple $1,000s is really tough. And she constantly glances over that fact. $1 trillion for 40 million people comes out to $25,000 each. That's rough, especially because these people have just finished 22 years of formal education, their entire life, and are now going to go into the job market and get jobs that could possibly run the rest of their life. $25,000 is a whole lot to pay, even if you have 10 years to do so. For Donarski to underemphasize this fact so much truly takes away from her article because it shows she doesn't understand completely what it's like, because all she knows are the numbers surrounding the issue, not what's actually happening. But that is not the only thing that Donarski really thinks of incorrectly. She really has underlying assumptions about jobs. I won't deny that a college graduate makes a lot more money than simply a high school graduate, but they still have to get the job. As well as that, certain jobs that are major specific tend to be harder to find, and with no job, paying off literally any amount of debt from a student loan is impossible. And as the job market increasingly becomes more competitive, it will be increasingly more difficult for someone to pay off their own student loans. Throughout this article, she simply says that yes, sometimes these people won't make that much. She never even thinks that perhaps they're making no money, and that can mess up her conclusion for how to solve this issue altogether. Overall, though, this article is well formatted, well written, and truly dwells deep into the topic at hand, even if it may seem one-sided. Donarski truly was able to explain student loans economically in simple enough language so that someone like myself can understand it who has not studied economics whatsoever until June of this year. With this simple to understand article on an incredibly interesting topic, this article truly grasps you, pulls you in, and does not let you go until you've finished, as it did with me. That being said, of course, as I have described above, there were obvious improvements, but even without those, it is a great article. One major aspect of this article that makes it so good is the time it spends on the solution. All the time we read, watch, and see issues in the world, and we rarely learn about possible solutions to those problems. But Donaski spent many pages explaining how an income-based repayment system would and could work in the United States so as to alleviate the massive debt students have grown accustomed to in the past couple of decades. And with this solution being clearly displayed to our audience, Donaski shows how there's hope to fixing the issue at hand, something people rarely see in today's society. Now that I have a newfound intelligence with this issue as well as a better understanding of how the government must aid in solving the issue through legislative action, I can better do something, anything, to help solve this national issue.